Yeah, thank you. Just to introduce us, I'm Simon Metcalfe. I'm with TUI Airways, based in the UK. I'm the fatigue risk manager, and Dennis is with TUI Fly Germany. He's a fatigue risk manager, and he's now becoming the FRM manager, fatigue manager for the TUI airline, our new entity of bringing together several airlines. I'd also like to say it's a real pleasure to meet so many subject matter experts, to be here. Rather nervous, actually, I have to say. More nervous than flying the circling approach to Split in marginal weather, I'd say. It's also great, thank you very much to EASA for inviting us, and to our hosts, the Croatian Civil Aviation Agency, for hosting us so well in this spectacular environment. I also like the fact that for once I was able to get off an aircraft and come to Split rather than walk around it after refueling, go and fly back home. So that's been great as well. So the way we're going to do this is actually we're going to split our duties, is that right?
Yes, split. And guess what? We are sharing the responsibility as well. So, well, first of all, we are going to show you who we are as TUI Airline. So what we have been doing for the past 2 years now, I guess. Yeah, and then, of course, we are talking about the data and hazard identification. Then we have a few case studies. And then, of course, in the end, any questions that may have appeared.
Thanks.
All right. Then, so closer to the mic. Okay. So whenever you hear us talking about regions, we are talking about those 5 AOCs. So we have the German AOC, we have the UK AOC, Sweden, Belgium, and the Netherlands. So we are having a centralized fatigue risk management across 5 regions and under a group safety management system.
So we operate a fleet of 130 aircraft. That's increasing, as you can see from the map, across Europe, out towards Asia, and out to the west of Florida, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Predominantly operating 737 aircraft, renewing the fleet with 737 MAX. We also operate the 787 fleet, and we have a few Embraer aircraft.
So as we started this project, we did no, that's wrong. So, yes. So basically what we are doing in a moment, we have those 500 AOCs under a single management structure. We have aligned management manuals, and yeah, we are working on further digitalization.
Actually, I would say that Dennis did remind me that the English not very good at English, and that if I speak too quickly, he's changing the speaker's notes to German. So hopefully, under the single management structure, the sort of streamlining, the sort of using the digital age, we're seeing some benefits. We're looking for a holistic approach. We like to use all these words, but it is actually looking at the whole system, looking at the connections, looking at the bigger picture. We also, synergy is another word we like to use a lot, but it's the combined effect is greater than the sum of our entities. And we're definitely seeing that. The conversations we're having, talk a little bit in the next slides, are helping in that. And ultimately, increasing the effectiveness of our risk management, whether that is in our regions or that's TUI Airline as a whole.
So as we started this project, we also did a SWOT analysis, gap analysis, and an MOC process. So with the SWOT analysis, we were basically facing what's going around us. We focus on the present time with an eye onto the future. We did have a scope, so greater understanding. We had broad discussions, and we always tried to see the big picture. And then, of course, we did have opportunities. So, for example, closer collaborations. We were sharing our knowledge, and we gained actually more expertise.
So from there, we moved from our SWOT analysis to a gap analysis, and that was really getting into the specifics, talking about just the present, but actually very much an eye on the future. As Dennis said, setting the scope, it's very much targeted work, identifying specific gaps, were those gaps between ourselves or with regulation, and then working very much on the delivery and the assurance. And just from that point, we then moved into our MOC. So we have a comprehensive MOC. All the AOCs host the MOC, and that's looking at very much of sort of some of the threats to change management. So we have a number of mitigations they're putting in place, some milestones we have to meet, and we review it regularly, and that's a theme that we will keep on repeating, that it's no good just doing an MOC and putting it away. It's a living document. You've got to keep on going back to it and seeing if your assumptions are correct, if your mitigations are effective, or whether you need to do more work.
So, the FRMS principles. Everyone knows them. They're everywhere you are, they're the same. But we did notice, in those 5 regions, we did notice some different approaches. So, for example, we did have a different FRM policy in all of the regions. We did have different approaches in the hazard identification processes. We did have differences in the assurance processes and definitely promotion processes.
Yeah. What we did do is we moved everybody onto the same reporting tool. So everybody's using the same forms. And we then worked on looking at our procedures for processing fatigue reports and SPIs. But,
and like Simon said, with the gaps, we also noticed some challenges. So some challenges greater than others. So for example, flying programs. We did have different flying programs across the regions. So we had a mix of long haul, medium haul, and then medium and short haul. So definitely a challenge, but then some of the challenges, they're also linked to each other. So if you look at the data, we are the ones who are receiving the fatigue reports, so we know what the people are talking about, but maybe it's not enough, we need more. So that will be part or will be linked to the training part as we then tell the people what we need to know.
So some of these challenges were greater than others. And actually some of the challenges would surprise us. So actually looking at regulation, despite the fact that the UK sits outside EASA, there is actually no regulation difference. And also the principles of FRM are over and above that. So actually, good FRM looks good everywhere, regardless of regulation. And so straight away we could move on to things where we really did see that we needed to sort of concentrate our efforts. Interestingly, we thought language may be an issue, but then we discovered that with the exception of one form, all the forms were in English already. So there are a number of things that we can then quickly move on to. And as Dennis said, SPIs, data, and procedures was our focus. So just picking on some things in procedures. Some of our procedures come up against whether it's national legislation or it is industrial agreements. So we pushed our standardization of our procedures as far as we could. And then when we came up to something which needed a local solution, there will be a local solution. But in terms of the SPIs, what we wanted to do is make sure that we were using a common language. We were actually tracking very, very similar things, but we weren't using the same taxonomy. And we wanted to make sure that we could not only identify issues in our regions, but what the fatigue risk threat was for the whole TUI airline. And then data, we're going to talk a little bit about data, but how we handle data. So the data is now stored centrally in Germany, all the data for all the airlines, and we're in a better place to sort of leverage our data. Like many companies, we store a lot of data, but data is only data.
The FRM policy. To underline the integration of the FRM into an SMS, it's very important to show that the policy sits within the safety management system framework. So in the end, it's also documented in the safety management manual. It defines responsibilities, reporting expectations, and also the fatigue-related safety objectives. And then, of course, it emphasizes the leadership commitment and defines the shared responsibility between airline and crew.
Yeah, just to pick up on what Dennis said, it's absolutely key that our FRM objectives move with the overall objectives. They're all together. Also, the leadership have committed resources in order to make this happen. So we've brought in external training providers to provide training to all the members of the FRM team, and indeed actually other members of the safety teams, with the whole idea of filling in gaps, getting us together, promoting discussion. So there's been lots of meetings around Europe at various locations in order to do that. And the last thing, you hear a lot of time about shared responsibility, but we are passionate about shared responsibility. Fatigue is a whole life issue. I've told that at my first course, and it's essential that everybody understands that. It's not just the responsibility of the operator or the regulator, but it's also of the individual. The individual has to understand their responsibilities in terms of managing their fatigue and understanding the risks.
So, as you all know, FRM is a data-driven system. So, we love data, and in the end, what we do with the data, we need to put it into information and knowledge. So how we are doing this we are looking at trends and spikes in predictive and reactive reports. We do look at FDM events, we look at safety reports. We also take into account the biomedical model outputs. So for example, we look at the roster publications and then how it looked like published versus flown. And then, of course, we also take into account operational performance indicators such as commander's discretion rates and sickness rates.
Just before you go to the next slide, Dennis, so in terms of the biomathematical modeling, we've done an awful lot of work on slicing the data. So we look at a number of metrics with it, not just we look at 4 main points, but there are others as well. And for us, it's actually having a range of tools in order to be able to see what picture we're getting. So not only just comparing month to month, but we're comparing season to season, year to year, and then breaking it down in terms of fleet, rank, base, whatever, to try and see the picture, see what we're maybe missing. And what we've found with that is actually not only can we make predictions in terms of changes to the program year on year, and the impact they have on fatigue. We can look at rostering in terms of manpower supply. So we can see if there's at the rostering stage where there are increases in average fatigue, which can be an indication of manpower issues, or it can be program changes. And then also we can see the effects of day-to-day operational changes. So they are some of the key things. And we found them to be very, very reliable, and a direct correlation between our fatigue reporting and the changes we see in the rosters. So the output, as I said, feeds into the reviews and the risk assessments. It's not, as I said, it's lots of feeds coming in to try and get the picture on that. There's just not a one-size-fits-all. And actually, the Marco from Condor, his point about you have to find what fits you. This is what's fitting us, this is our journey, but we're here to learn from everybody here, and we will certainly go back, discuss, and revise. We also use surveys, alertness surveys on board, so crew, flight crew, cabin crew, fill out alertness surveys. We often do that targeted rather than necessarily broad brush, so if we want to look at certain routes, we will do that, but also we'll have a control on a route that we know is at lower fatigue, just so we can see some comparison. We can look for indications of cumulative fatigue. One of the most challenging things is trying to actually look at cumulative fatigue, a discussion I was having with our EasyJet colleagues over the last 2 days. It is a real challenge. And we're always looking for context. And when we talk about context, it is the context of our operation, the real world of what's happening in our airline. It's the route network, it's the long haul, the short haul, demographics, rostering, scheduling, it's all those things. But we're looking for specific real-world circumstances in which the airline is operating. And finally, the SPIs, common safety indicators across all regions on the same reporting platform. And we put a lot of work into that, and we know that we're at the beginning of a journey. There's lots of work to do on that to see that we are actually capturing the right things within our SPIs. But we have a certain confidence that we've probably got too many to begin with, and what we'll do is we will see how effective those SPIs are going forward, and then we adjust them accordingly.
Yep.
So, a case study, and I'm going to rattle through this because I see that we've got 10 minutes. So, this is very simple. We've got two very simple case studies, but to give you an idea of how we do things. So, we saw a little bit rise of fatigue reporting in the previous season, and we started looking at the reasons, and some of the things like GPS, radio frequency interference, or spoofing. We had transit times to and from the hotel because we were using a new airport. They were still developing the hotels around that airport. And we also, because of the airspace closure, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, was increasing the flight times. During this period, Boeing issued an airworthiness directive, and effectively, they found a potential risk with depressurization, which could, with a panel, impact on the captain's head. They issued this mandated airworthiness directive, which severely restricted the recline of the captain's seat, the left-hand seat. And there was no, and there is no, to this day, any alternative means of compliance. So we started getting reports that it was affecting the controlled rest. And the other thing about it is a number of our routes are permitted two-crew operation because they had an extended layover in Goa. So we had a mixture of 3-crew and 2-crew operation. So we did investigation, and so working very, very closely with our colleagues, we looked at the safety reports for the spoofing, and we confirmed that it's an operational risk. The S787 is a highly integrated aircraft, and it was increasing workload. There is work ongoing for an alternative means of compliance. I imagine there's people in this room who are very much involved in that, but that's going to take time. Anything that's to do with airworthiness directives takes time. We also saw that the risk associated with unforeseen fatigue, and therefore the need for controlled rest, and increased workload was not mitigated by a longer rest period in Goa. Hotel options remained limited, and as a result of that, the longer transit times would remain. So what we did was we used biomathematical modeling to look at a whole lot of scenarios and just sort of come up and see what we could find from the modeling, using different rest periods, using 3-pilot operation with in-flight rest. So we ended up with an action plan. The conclusions that, as I said, longer rest period in Goa did not deliver the equivalent fatigue mitigation of 3-pilot operation, even with a lesser rest period. Unforeseen fatigue was difficult to mitigate because of seat issues, and we presented our conclusions at FSAG. Just to say, our FSAG, we invite everybody to our FSAG, so all the union representatives come to our FSAG, and there's an open invitation to all the authorities that can come to our FSAG. We revised the slip schedule. We reduced the rest period in Goa, but in doing so, because resource is finite, we were able to put 3 pilots on all the flights, and this was a popular decision. The cabin crew were already using the Class 3 rest facility for fatigue mitigation, but we then formalised that and rostered them in the same way as the pilots for a formalised rest period. And that's also because we have a shared crew rest area and need to coordinate between cabin crew and flight crew on that. So the hazard log, the risk register updated, the action plan, monthly review. The fatigue reports were closely monitored from the flight crew and the cabin crew. The risk is reviewed at FSAG each month, and when we did a targeted 787 alertness survey, and we saw much, much lower levels of fatigue reporting. We still accept the fact that it is a fatiguing route, but also what we believe should happen was supported by the alertness survey results, which ought to give you a little bit more granular data.
Yes, next case study. So we did have flights to and from Cape Verde. Some key facts. So we did receive high levels of fatigue reports. It's a single 6-hour sector flight before crews are road positioning back to their home base. And cabin crews and flight crews have different agreements. So which means cabin crew can travel through the VOCL. And then we also have a fatigue risk mitigation already in place, so that a crew can request a hotel at the home base if they are too fatigued to travel back home. During the investigation, So just like I said, we have the different agreements. So this means the flight crews were able to go into the hotel on landing before positioning on the next day, whereas the cabin crews immediately travel to their home base for around like 4 hours. Then, of course, it's a road transport. It's going through the Wockel, which is also pressure for the driver who's driving the crew. And then most of the times the road works were being done during the night so that the traffic doesn't have any issues during the day. Then we also looked at the self-assessment alertnesses in the fatigue reports. We used the biomathematical modeling to estimate the alertness after positioning to their home base. And what we didn't track was basically how many crew members took the hotel due to being unfit to travel when arriving at the home base. Conclusions, high fatigue risk for cabin crew members at their home base. We also have had an increased safety risk positioning the crews overnight during the Wockel. We did have an increase in cost due to the hotel before positioning, but they were basically partially offset if we combined the flight crews with the cabin crews. And then the cabin crew members who took a hotel when arriving at home base, the costs do existed, but we didn't capture them. So the decision in the end was that the cabin crew were also able to take the hotel instead of positioning right after it. So they were positioning with the flight crews on the following day. Just in the other example, hazard log and risk register were updated with a monthly review. We from now on tracked the use of the hotel at the home base, and we closely monitored the fatigue reports with similar patterns. And the outcome was 0 fatigue reports, and so we adopted a standard rostering practice for that.
So in terms of our safety assurance and continuous loop, very basic slide, but we do believe in the plan, do, check, act. So going back to the point I made earlier, it is about continuous monitoring. So you've got to ensure the fatigue controls, the actions remain effective, you're not missing anything, you need to update those on a regular basis, and at the same time look and see if there's any emerging risks coming in, any unintended consequences from your action identified and addressed. But the point we want to sort of emphasize for us is it has to be a regular review, and it has to be a continuous and not being satisfied, and just keep on going around the loop all the time.
And then, of course, fatigue promotion, training and safety culture. So we do have, of course, training for all personnel who are involved, but we even expanded it to senior leadership and also HR personnel, because they are the ones who are in the end responsible for manpower planning and making decisions for it. And then also, whenever negotiations are going on, so they need to have the awareness of fatigue.
Communication is fundamental to engaging. That engagement already said. We are not always as possible to feedback to every fatigue report, but what we do is monthly or every 2 months, bite-sized chunks targeted to an audience, because no one likes reading anymore. So if you can't put it in a small chunk, you're just not going to reach your audience. And the idea is to say, these are the sort of reports we've been getting, this is what we're doing about it, so that everybody knows that action's been taken because of fatigue reports. And we're honest. We're honest about things we can't change. So we miss things, and recently we missed something where a change in the schedule on our Far Eastern rotation meant that actually we'd created a fatiguing route. We had to be honest, but while we could put some mitigations in immediately in terms of increasing rest on board, the slot provision at the landing airport, which was Gatwick, would not permit us to immediately change for several months. So we had about 3 months, which we had to go through. And we have to be honest and say that we can't actually manage this, but we understand it, and we'll put these mitigations. What we do is give our promise of undertaking that in our slip review meetings, which is something that we do well ahead of the next season, we will make sure we capture this and work out why we missed the schedule change. And a just culture, as I said, is absolutely essential. Crews must feel safe reporting fatigue. There is still misconceptions, and again, that's why the promotion comes in there, to keep on telling people we have actually a good reporting culture. We like to see lots of reports. We encourage lots of reports. And particularly with unfit, that's essential that you have a just culture in there. They need to feel comfortable that they can go unfit.
So, short summary. So what we are doing is bringing together proactive reporting, organizational learning, science-based modeling, and it's all within the structure of a safety management system.
There's no single solution. As we said, we use a suite of tools. We need to integrate them, we need to validate them, we need continuous feedback loops. We're data-driven, but recognizing, as I said, fatigue is a whole life issue. It's shaped by work, rest, life factors. It's a human at the end of the day, and with human strengths and human weaknesses.
And it all ensures fatigue is managed proactively rather than reactively, and this is how FRM becomes part of the safety DNA, rather than being a standalone program. Done.
Time's up.
I was going to say, if you want to take a seat, practice this space back there, and then Cristian will do his presentation, right, and then we'll take questions for the three of you all at the same time and do it that way. Fantastic. Thanks for that. That was really, what I was hoping, and we were hoping for, lots of practical stuff and really useful to hear another story about how it works. So now from the EASA side, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Cristian, who's going to run through the next part of this topic.
Good morning, everyone. I hope it's good indeed. I almost filed a fatigue report this morning after the lovely dinner, a Croatian dinner, late dinner last night. So, who am I? Cristian Conti. I'm an air operations expert and the principal operations inspector working in the air operator oversight section in EASA. I'm not a fatigue expert. I'm an oversight manager responsible for the oversight. I have my team of experts and subject matter experts joining me in the audits at our operators. But I will walk you through today a little bit on the journey of what we've done regarding the EASA oversight toolbox concept, how we've developed the checklist. You will see later on, I will speak shortly. We have not reinvented the wheel. There was a combined work and work with our stakeholders. A few words on the oversight and the checklist that we use for the oversight and the structure, and there's some expectations and perspectives from NA side and some of the challenges we observed. And I'm happy that I delivered this presentation now after seeing the presentations from ATF, Transavia, Condor, and now TUI. So I hope we will summarize a little bit also from NA side. And there are some further considerations and some of our lessons learned. So, where the concept of the oversight toolbox started, this was in 2018 with the new basic regulation. The aim and the objective was to develop a set of work instructions, checklists, forms. By using the best practices from the competent authorities, we have received support and examples. As I said, we have not reinvented the wheel. We focused on the technical aspects. These tools have been made available to all our member states. And of course, they are not intended to be used as indirect rulemaking. And you will see later on what I mean by this. So here is how they are being structured. At the high level, we have work instructions, and the general principle is all these checklists and the forms are linked to at least the work instructions, which outlines what's expected for that particular topic. Just some numbers here, where we are as of February. Maybe my colleagues have already approved more, but we have around 35 work instructions, 95 checklists, and various forms. And we group them in 5 main, let's say, categories. On the higher level, we have the management system, that outlines, the qualifications of the staff, sets up the management system as an authority, management of changes, and so on, and then, grouped into other various, groups like certifications, all the checklists used for the certification, some special cases of certifications with the specific approvals, and then on the right-hand side, you see the oversight work instructions and some of the generic ones. So, of course, this list that you see here on the screen is not the exhaustive list. I could not put 100 documents here, but... the format you are familiar with. As I said, we have not reinvented the wheel. On FTL, we've taken the format also developed by our colleagues in rulemaking. On the left-hand side, you have the regulatory reference, the implementing rule, the applicable rule. Then we have the requirement. Sometimes we only put the summary in this checklist because the requirement and implementing rule is quite long. We have specific requirements and expectations that we outline in the checklist for our inspectors or for the operators. This example here is a certification checklist where we have this column, which is called the evaluation from the operator side. And when an operator submits a request for a change, we expect the operator to take the checklist and run through the checklist and demonstrate compliance to us from their point of view. Then the checklist comes to us, and that's where we come in at the evaluation of the competent authority, where we have these categories of not being applicable, compliant, non-compliant. There is a remark, observation, or not reviewed. If that part is not reviewed. And then, of course, there is the free text. You are all familiar with this, where you have to put the comments why a specific line or a specific requirement is compliant. Okay, moving on. I see the clock ticking, or not ticking, but okay. So for the FTL, FRM, and SMS oversight, we have two checklists that we use for the certification. So the first two ones, you've heard this during yesterday as well, the individual flight time specification scheme, and a fatigue risk management checklist used for the certification. And then when we move onto the oversight part, we have the FTL audit. And for the time being, we still have sub-RQ until this will change. And then, because of the topic of my presentation, I also put the management system audit checklist. Just a note here, this is, I will be talking today about, or the example is on an operator without an approved FRMS system. We are talking about a voluntary FRM. So for this case, an operator do not have to comply with the FTL 120. We are more looking at the FTL 110. And of course, there is further guidance in the ICAO document, 9966, you all know. But just to be clear on what you'll see later on. So we're diving into the topic, integrating the FRM into SMS, by managing crew fatigue, the safety, and we all heard about the data-driven decision-making. So here we are. I think we can all agree that in order to have an effective FRM, you need to have a mature SMS. So this goes without saying that you need to understand what you get out of your SMS. You need to get the buy-in of the crew. We heard a few times about the shared responsibility. So this is the strong foundation for an effective FRM. So the mature SMS. I will try to see this thing. On the right-hand side, you have the documentation and the processes. So we heard about presented also from the industry. It's not just from us. All the operations manuals, the policies, outlining and describing, the roles and responsibilities. Then you have the fatigue safety action group. What are the expectations? science, the principles, the decision from the operator, what works for them, the risk assessment, the hazard identification process also described, the taxonomies for the assessments, the mitigations that are being put in place, and then, okay, moving into monitoring and improvement, which is a very important part of it because, this is a regular review. And the promotion and training. So I've tried to summarize on the right-hand side, what we expect as an authority. And then on the left-hand side, of course, you have the organization structure, you have the fatigue risk manager, who is liaising with the rest of the organization and is responsible for the maintenance and the implementation of the policy and the FRM. Some, of course, this is not exhaustive. Some departments, and we've seen some questions yesterday on who do we involve or who do we expect to see involved in the FRM. It's a shared responsibility, so I think we can all agree on that. I just put here operations, safety, HR, and the training department, but of course there is so much more. And within the operations, you can, you have the planning, the crewing, rostering, scheduling, and so on. In the middle part, just to summarize a bit, what has not been mentioned maybe is the management of change. This is another expectation that whenever there is a change in the organization, new routes, or you move from short haul to long haul, or all sorts of changes that require management of change, we would expect to see the fatigue also being taken into consideration. And about the risk matrix, we will speak a little bit later because this is also customized as it fits within the organization. And I think that's it on this side. So some of the challenges we observed. Excuse me for a second. So we heard about the operational robustness and the data reliability. So there are various inputs that goes in. So I mean, we know the concept garbage in, garbage out, or rubbish in, rubbish out. But it's very important that these are being constantly reviewed to make sense. We've seen just earlier about for example, the published versus the flown roster, all the biomath models, the fatigue reports. Of course, this is important. I have a slide just in a couple of minutes about the importance to have data in these reports, so you don't have to spend time to follow up and understand further what the crew wanted to say. Then, okay, KPIs, SPIs, this is monitored. This is important to make sense for the organization. The Commander Discretion Report, this is an exceptional, let's say, but it could also provide valuable input within the system. And the FDM events, I put it here. This, of course, you have to look at the event itself, whether there is a fatigue-related or there is a potential fatigue-related event, and to follow up on that. Now, on the actual matrix, I think we can all agree that a traditional matrix may not be appropriate because fatigue is not an event. There are multiple factors contributing. There's a physiological condition, and in regard to the contributing factors, you've heard yesterday Barbara, Christina, and so on talking about various of these factors. But okay, you have the circadian rhythm, prolonged wakefulness, disrupted sleep, and so on. So what I ask the team when we go on site is always to keep in mind that we do safety oversight. So at the end of the day, for me as an oversight manager, I want to see is there an impact on safety? So I always emphasize the need to keep this in mind, whether it affects the operational safety performance. So this is something we keep in mind, of course, with all the respect on the work that's been put in. So here is an example. Of course, this is everyone adapts their example, but we have, or it starts with a fatigue report, and that's AI-generated picture. So this is what AI thinks that happens in the back. And that's the picture of also AI imagining the flight crew and cabin crew. So you decide, you have various, let's say, conditions. You may have traffic, weather, delays, slot allocations, anything that could lead to that situation where the crew would like to or they feel fatigued. Then that gets into a system where you have to assess the state at the time of report. So determine the crew member's fatigue level at the time of reporting. No fatigue, low fatigue, moderate fatigue, high fatigue. We've seen the scores and the graphs that are being used. Here I put the Samparelli, but of course, you can choose. Then you move into evaluating of how this affects the operational performance. And then I put here step 3, but okay, you can have 4, 5, 6 steps, wherever is needed. You can close the report, provide countermeasure guidance. You can, decide to review it further, take action, provide additional training, discuss further in the FSAG meeting, or even escalate a specific route to the SRB or wherever is needed. But this is just a quick example. I'm looking at the time of what we see out in the industry. Some further considerations. We've heard about this. I don't want to insist further on the first point, but it's really a shared responsibility between the crew members and the operator. The operator should not make advantage and stretch the crew, and the crew as well. We should not, abuse the options available. One point from us is about the allocation of the risk that fatigue deserves, and we see it at times across the industry that is not given the right weight that it deserves. And I'm happy to see the presentations this yesterday and today that is giving the right weight. Okay, I hope this is not too controversial, but we see it lately as well. There is a lot of effort put into the crew profiling, a lot of discussions about the generations differences. We heard yesterday about the resilience when it comes to an older crew and so on. But here what I'm trying to say is that if the, let's say, the big picture is not seen, talking about the current social economical factor affecting the younger generation, about the various factors that could affect the sleep quality, sharing accommodation, and so on, or even, crew having a second job. So all these things, at some point, may have an impact on the models that are being run. And of course, training is an element that it's constantly being adapted, enhanced, tailored for all personnel involved. Some lessons learned from our side as a competent authority: the need to have a thorough verification and scrutiny during the certification. So we always, talk to the operators and try to understand why. Why is there a FRM in the first place? What are they trying to achieve? Is it adapted to the size and complexity of the operation? And then, of course, we follow through the checklist and the documentation available that we have. The training of the inspectors is an important point. It's something that we value and we pay close attention to it. And I'm fortunate to be able to go on site with a mix of inspectors from other authorities and subject matter experts who have different experiences and operational exposure. And I see the benefit on site where when you talk about the rosters or the various patterns that we could easily pick up on hot potatoes there. Last one is summarizing a little bit what we've discussed, people, processes, and records, and the fact that all these tools that we have and we have made available to the member states, to the inspectors, and to the industry is to ensure, the comprehensive compliance checks, and of course the records and the completion of the paperwork that's expected. So that's it from my side. Thank you very much. And if there is any questions, we're here. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to take a seat? Stuart, Cristian, do you want to come up? And we'll go through some questions. And share the questions. And I was particularly interested, while we're getting it up, I was particularly interested, one of the questions, you'll see it in a minute. Somebody's obviously short on fatigue. Top fat hazards. 3 weeks in to the pre-Easter conference season, my biggest hazard is hotel buffets. If that helps. Sorry, right, are we ready? Can we share? Perfect. So the first one from Philip, do you do targeted fatigue surveys among crew? Are you planning to do AOC-wide or group-wide surveys on crew's views about the FRM and fatigue reporting culture? I realise, sorry, I called you Stuart for some reason instead of Simon.
I've been called worse.
Many apologies.
So the answer to that question is yes, but we do have cultural differences. We have to recognise that. We have different industrial relations. But we do see the value of targeted surveys of the crew. We very much want to, as soon as we can, launch group-wide surveys on the view about TUI's FRM and the fatigue reporting culture. We see slightly different reporting cultures across the regions. That's something we need to understand, and then in turn promote. That's the most important thing as well here, is to promote the need to report. Even low-level reporting is important to us because it helps us see the emerging risks. I think sometimes people say, well, it didn't really matter, it was only so much, nothing happened, but we want to hear everything. We want to hear the low-level noise as well as the key areas. Dennis?
Perfect answer.
Yeah, that sounded perfect. Very good. Thanks. So for the next one, thanks for the interesting presentations. You said that you conduct in-flight surveys when necessary. What type of methods do you apply?
Okay, we have an alertness survey. It's very simple. It's you estimate your alertness at check-in, at top of climb, and at top of descent. It's all the crew, cabin crew and pilots have access to an iPad, company iPad. It's on there. Is this the most effective way? No, it's not. There are other ways of doing it, and actually, I've had presentations from airlines that have incorporated it into other methods, including the journey logs. So they even actually get a pop-up reminder that's saying, time to do your alertness. So that's the way we're doing it, but we're looking for, particularly for the cabin crew, something which sits in with their work cycle better. For the flight crew, check-in, top of climb, top of descent is quite straightforward. For the cabin crew, we know that's a little bit more challenging, but we do get good data, and we don't mandate. We haven't mandated this happens. We haven't gone down that route yet, and yet we still get good data. But targeted, just go back, people get survey fatigue, and if you keep on asking the question, after a while, you stop things. So what we like to do is pick a period of time, particularly where we see risks are higher, shoulder months, where the weather is more challenging, or towards the end of the season where the crews are becoming more fatigued, and sometimes literally just target a route for the cabin crew and the flight crew.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. This is the one I was talking about for the top fat fatigue hazards. Do you introduce specific SPIs for them?
So talking about SBIs is a little tricky because we are on a journey with our SBIs right now, but yes, we do. But it's also fair, as we said in our presentation, that we are bringing everything together. Dennis, do you want to talk a little bit about the SBIs because you've been very close to it?
Yeah, so with SPIs, we noticed across the regions that we also did have different approaches with the SPIs, and we still tried to make them work together sometimes, or get them even in the same language, in the same context. And like Simon said, I mean, usually we do have specific SPIs for the hazards.
Yeah, and actually it's a continual discussion we're having. In fact, the next SAFE 360 conference we're going to have in October, we're going to have a specific session just sharing experiences on how SPIs, how we use SPIs at an operational level as part of an SMS, at a more strategic level. I think it's always a challenge, isn't it? It's easy to talk about them and say you have them, but it's, what do they give you in terms of value is always a challenge sometimes.
I mean, it is a challenge because, I mean, like Cristian said, there are so many contributing factors that lead to fatigue. It's not always just one SPI.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's quite complicated. So next question again for the two of you. What questions did you include in the 787 alertness study? How did the results compare with biomathematical modelling?
So the first bit already answered. It's very, very simple. It's very, very straightforward. We want it to be simple because then it's not become onerous. How it compared, surprisingly close. Our belief was that actually we might see great variability. We also were concerned that assessing your own fatigue is tricky. It is personal. There are word pictures to guide you in terms of what the Samparelli. That was one of the things we did at the beginning, was we all moved on to the same system. We decided to go with the Samparelli. Not that we have anything against Karolinska, it was just a decision that we needed to make. But we actually did find the correlation was closer than we expected. But we did think that people were more likely to under-report than over-report, because when you're fatigued, you're not necessarily that well-placed in order to make that assessment. So it's, that was the outcome of that. So yeah, it's proven to be useful, validated.
Great, thanks. For the next one from Mads at the back there from Denmark, if we as an NAA use the EASA checklist, do they need to be customized to our own procedures, or can we use them without modifying them?
Yeah, so this is a question we see quite often. What we've seen is that NAs or member states, they've adopted the checklist and modified to add the logo of the authority and so on. The checklists are out there. You can use them as it fits. But yes, it will have to match your procedures. So the structure that you've seen, the work instruction with outlines, the oversight or the process to, for example, certify a specific approval, that has to be developed. This is expected to be seen within the authority, so a work instruction or procedure, or how you name it, and then the associated checklist with that. You can take it as it is from EASA and use it, yes, but it has to match an instruction or a procedure that you have in the authority.
Excellent, thanks for that. Another one for you, Cristian. Do you expect inspectors to use the checklist during audits? Is there enough time for using it?
Yeah, it's not that we expect, we have to. We have to demonstrate at the end of the oversight cycle that we've covered all the applicable scope. So yes, the short answer is yes. And if there is enough time, you have to plan and to allocate enough time. But don't forget that for an audit, the key is the preparation. So if you go prepared and you know where to look at, then yeah, you would go quicker too. And the more you use it and the more you get used to it, the faster you go through the checklist.
Fantastic, thanks. And maybe we take this last one. Does EASA use indicators to measure operators' performance regarding fatigue, e.g. commander's discretion use, reduce CC out of base, fatigue reports?
Yes, absolutely. There is in the regulations, for example, the CDRs over an hour, you get them within 28 days. We also get fatigue reports or let's say an exceedance reports at the end of the month, and we do monitor this. In terms of performance, We have a risk-based oversight model that we run, and we amend it and we updated it as it needs, and also when it comes to fatigue. But in the bigger picture, not just from an authority, you cannot always spend granular time, but we look at the big picture.
Fantastic, thanks very much. So we come to the end of our time. As I said yesterday, we'll take the other questions away and group them and provide answers, so it's not that they'll be lost. And yeah, thanks for continuing to ask questions. Huge thanks to Simon, to Dennis, and to Cristian. Thank you very much.